This is Kirk Kumerow, and I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural edition of an overview of performing an environmental record review for a Rebuild Illinois grant issued by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities, Office of Community Development. The completion of an environmental record review is a fairly straightforward process, and I hope this session will help you to feel comfortable and to be able to proceed in a timely manner. The grant awards we are covering today are state-issued, state-funded Rebuild Illinois grants solely issued by DCO's Office of Community Development. These do not include any federal funds, and they do not include Rebuild Illinois grants or legislative add-on grants issued by other divisions in DCO. Following your organization or community's award of Rebuild Illinois grant, the first documentation you would have received from your grant manager is a NOSAF, a Notice of State Award finalist, that others in this process will explain. That is the first step, and it includes the environmental record review requirements necessary for this grant to proceed. The limitation of action is on being able to access and commit and spend those funds is prior to all special grant conditions being cleared. The grant awardee may not commit Rebuild Illinois funds, begin the bid process, or commit non-Rebuild Illinois funds that will be included in the eventual grant agreement. So therefore, do not take action before environmental clearance is my message, but your grant manager's message is don't take any action on bidding prior to all special grant conditions being cleared. I've already put together a detailed Rebuild Illinois environmental record review instructions set of 3.5 pages sheets that are available on the following website. Please print those review sheets for guidance while you're preparing the environmental record review. I'm sorry, I'm a paper learner, I'm not a website learner, so it's easier for me to print it out, and it'll give you a quick reference material when you've stopped at a particular point. Because as you obtain the clearances that I'm going to be talking about in the next few slides, you're going to be multitasking with different state agencies. The good news for those of you who are either CDBG direct entitlement grantees or have obtained CDBG or other federal funds is that because these are state funds, the requirements that are more cumbersome for 16 bodies of federal law required under the federal NEPA statute do not apply to this grant. The state is basically using the four main requirements for every state grant and adding 2 federal conditions. The first of those, the state requirements, are that you will have to obtain 4 state environmental agency clearances, and those are listed from IEPA, from the IDNR EcoCat, from the Department of Agriculture, the Illinois Department, not the federal, and from Illinois Shippo, which is located a block away from us underneath the old state capitol. You'll also need to obtain a current version of the FEMA format with the exact project locations marked. It must be from the FEMA website, and it must be the most current version. For example, I know that Esri provides much clearer copies than the federal FEMA site. You have to use FEMA site, print it out. You can either computer draw or hand draw your exact project location or locations on the format. And please use the most current version available. If that's a larger urban area, and by larger I mean even like Decatur sized, then it should be the dynamic version of the format. If it's an old map drawn, that's what's available, use it. If FEMA says you're not, the community hasn't been mapped, then just use that. It'll be like a grid pattern and just mark the approximate location to show it's in a FEMA unmapped area. That's fine. You'll also need to provide a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wetlands mapper with the exact project location marked. And again, it must be from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wetland mapper website and not from a private source such as Esri. It basically has to have that federal seal on it. If any portion of a project's locations are in a FEMA mapped floodplain or are on listed by DNR's EcoCat as a state source and or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for wetlands, it crosses or sits in a floodplain or wetland, then you will also have to prepare an 8-step floodplain and or wetland review process, which includes 2 required publications and their follow-up comment periods that are done consecutively. So that means the first publication is published a day later, you count 15 days, and then a day after that, you wait a day and draw your conclusions, update your 8-step, and then a day later, you'll do the second 7-day publication. Hopefully that won't happen. We didn't have any of those in our first round of 17 Fast Track Rebuild Illinois grants. The keynote here is that all environmental record review supporting documentations must be 2 years old at the date they are submitted as part of the complete environmental record review. If they're older, then you need to go back to that state agency or onto one of those 2 federal maps and have those reproduced, refreshed with current dates. There are 2 less common scenarios, the first of which hopefully was reviewed by me in your initial application, where I reviewed just the FEMA formats to make sure no part of the project location was in a floodway. However, if any of your project locations, once you map them yourself on the FEMA format site, are in a prohibited floodway, you need to contact me as the division's environmental review officer immediately. We will do our best, you and I, to work to revise the project site or the portion of it out of the floodway. If not, unfortunately, it would have to be canceled. The reason for this is, unless a use of funds, of grant funds, is a functionally dependent use of the floodway, the state does not want to put its money into something that might either be damaged by frequent flooding or increase the duration or frequency or the heights of future floods. As I said, it's most likely going to be rare. However, if it happens, functionally dependent uses of a floodway, it's work that has to be done in a floodway. A bridge pier, a fishing dock, a container port, a barge port on the Illinois or the Mississippi rivers, a boat repair shop. Those are all functionally dependent uses of a floodway. They have to be done in it. Outside of that, there is no reason that any of these projects should be in a floodway. The other one is, and this happened in Fast Track, one of the 17 grantees, unfortunately, in their case, it was Illinois Shippo at DNR, noticed the project site alongside a river just a couple miles south of Lake Michigan shoreline, which is an area of concern for wetlands management for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So if Illinois Shippo or another state or federal agency refers your organization to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a wetlands consultation, please comply and contact me immediately in writing to let me know that, because compliance to get an Army Corps of Engineers wetland permit can take well over a year. 20 years ago, in a different state-funded grant unit, we had one where they were building a bird watching dock on a river that was less than a mile from emptying into Lake Michigan. It took over 2 years to get that permit for a dock that cost around $40,000. And I've always kind of kept that in mind, that that's why for our regular funds, which is CDBG downstate, we don't touch Lake Michigan, and our projects generally stay away from the great rivers. So the Corps, basically, as long as we're doing an 8-step wetland review, they are copacetic with that. But in the cases where you're touching one of their key areas of concern, like a navigable waterway or a Great Lake, you may run into this, but hopefully not. The actual 3.5-page environmental review process sheets, or they'll say in some, the link will say, Rebuild Illinois detailed environmental detail instructions. They contain the information you're going to need for contacting the 4 state environmental agencies. Due to work volumes here, I don't have time every time to say, oh yeah, you need to call, you need to refer to ag, there's a form on their website. I've got that listed. I've got the web links listed for all of those state agencies. So please go on to DCO's website, which I provided earlier, and use those web links to see what documentation or see what website you need to access for those 4 state agencies. They'll be more than happy to help you. A key point here is for Illinois Shippo at the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. You, for Rebuild Illinois, will request a Section 707 clearance under state law, not a Section 106 clearance under federal law. I believe the state law is a little less restrictive than the federal law. If you already have a Shippo clearance letter that's less than 2 years old and it fits your project, covers it, and it's for Section 106, please, by all means, turn that in. However, if you still need a Shippo clearance letter, you will enter on their forms, you need the Section 707 state clearance. And of course, if your property itself is a historic property that's already registered or listed, and or if it's in a historic district or area that's federally or state listed, that will take more time with the Shippo for them to give their clearance. Again, these are the websites for FEMA Fermet, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then there's the link if you have to do an 8-step wetlands or floodplain review. And on those, I will be happy, if your project touches or crosses, a floodplain, a map floodplain, or a map wetland, including the little blue line that denotes a riverine feature, which may or not be visibly present all year round, but it's mapped by the feds. Let me know, show me those documents, email them to me, and you and I can try and concur whether or not an 8-step review is actually necessary. And once again, the detailed Rebuild Illinois Environmental Record Review instructions contain all of the relevant web links for all of the state and federal agencies cited above. Please refer to that first before contacting me for how to get a hold of one of those agencies. They will be happy to work with you directly. I've sent all 4 state agencies a list of the Rebuild Shovel Ready Sites grantees, and every time we have a Rebuild Illinois round in DCO, once those are awarded, I send those lists to those agencies so they know ahead of time. So if you're not on that list, they will politely, sometimes not so politely, say, sorry, we're not reviewing your request. But they know ahead of time that there should be right now a bunch of shovel-ready sites applicants heading to them for their specific clearances of specific state laws. It should really take no more than 60 to 90 days, depending on the level of consultations required with the state agencies, and if you have to do an 8-step review to complete a Rebuild Illinois environmental record review. Of course, the 2 big caveats are if your property is a historic property or is in a historic district, and or if the Corps of Engineers wants you to apply for a consultation with them for wetlands and then wants you to get a permit. Those would take more. Let me know, let me see the documentation in writing. I will print it out. I will let your grant manager, your Rebuild Illinois grant manager know, and the program manager, when she checks periodically, she'll know that that's the case. Just from like Fast Track, we've got one of 17 grants is going to wait for over a year while they and the Corps of Engineers haggle it out and they're ultimately, hopefully, issued a permit. But we will not penalize you if an environmental agency is holding you up, provided you've started the consultation in a timely manner. Yes, an early start is important. It makes sure that your project conforms to the state's environmental values and that you avoid potential conflicts, either with environmental regulatory agencies or the public. And it also is required because you cannot commit our funds to an activity without environmental clearance. So as part of the NOSAF, work the environmentals just like you would with business enterprise program, or with, say, you have to have your attorney general's not-for-profit filings up to date. Whatever special grant conditions are listed, just work on those together. They're simultaneous streams you're going to be doing to end up at the same 90-day destination. Fortunately, the scenario here hasn't had to happen in over a year, but in the period 1 to 3 years ago, the Shippo, due to state reorganization and other issues, was very short of staff, and it was taking them over 30 days to process historic preservation clearances, whether for state or federal funds. Both state and federal historic preservation laws give the Shippo a 30-day clock in which to process your request within 30 days, starting the day after you've turned it in, and provided that it is complete. We previously consulted with DCO's general counsel and the Shippo's agency's director and have instituted the following policy. If it has been more than 40 days since you've sent proper Section 707 information to the Shippo for their initial review and have not received a response, please contact me. Once I've been notified, I will tell you to put it in writing and provide documentation of when you turned it in, the proof that you sent it to the Shippo. Then we can provide a waiver letter from Shippo clearance. The DCO waiver letter would be utilized in your environmental record review in place of the Shippo's normal state clearance letter. If the Shippo then were to re-enter the review after the waiver letter, your organization or community would have no obligation to comply, but trust me, it's better to keep them happy in case you come back for a different agency's grant program or loan program. You want to keep the Shippo happy. So as I'm saying, at this time, as we record this is not an issue this year, but I just wanted to address it in case it comes up. And here is the Shippo's detailed contact information. Again, it is included in the 3.5-page Rebuild Illinois Environmental Record Review instruction sheets available on the DCO OCD Environmental Materials website. Cost of performing an environmental record review for Rebuild Illinois. If your construction, the environmental review of your construction, whether it's a building or if it's groundwork, involves a formal mitigation cost being taken on, which usually for our purposes, for our federal funded grants, always seems to be a certain species in different parts of the state that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources has authority over. Then your organization may reimburse itself at a later date from the construction funds once you have a grant agreement for the mitigation cost. Usually that would be and it can be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 or more for an incidental take authorization from IDNR that would allow the taking, meaning the killing or maiming of animals during the construction process. It's very rare, and it's usually, what we found is it's usually when you get near certain great rivers, the Illinois River, to a lesser extent the Mississippi River, or mounds, natural mounds where the Franklin's ground squirrel loves to reside for 80-some% of the year underground. So if that happens, let me know, we'll work through it. but your organization or community would have to pay the cost of finding an environmental specialist to prepare the paperwork to do an incidental take authorization. I'm hoping for shovel-ready sites that seem to be in more urban areas that will not be a factor. But again, I want to address it in case it comes up. When performing an environmental record review for Rebuild Illinois grants, as outlined in the guidebook, you must use an experienced environmental specialist. The grantee assumes the environmental record review preparation costs. I have a list in just about every area of the state, including Chicago metropolitan area, environmental specialists or grant administrators who have done environmental record reviews for our more lengthy federally funded CDBG grants. The core of those is still the 4 state agency letters, so they know those inside and out. I can always refer 2 or 3 names in a given area. I try and do more if I can, but at the least there's about 2 in every area. Or you can inquire directly to your local regional planning commission, especially if your community, whether you're a not-for-profit or a for-profit grantee, your community probably pays dues to a local regional planning commission. So you can look them up, see if they'd be interested in doing it for a free or reduced cost basis. The specialist may prepare supporting documentation for the environmental record review. However, the grantee, meaning your organization or your municipality or county, that whoever the grantee is, must independently evaluate their work before submitting the completed environmental record review to me for the state's review. And that is to make sure that it is full and complete and accurate. It's always good to double check your work before turning anything into a state agency. And when you do, always make sure to keep either the original or a color copy there so it doesn't get lost in the mail, because that has happened before. However, the one key caveat is on the specialist may prepare the 2 publications for print if an 8-step floodplain or wetlands review is required. However, it is published under the authority of the grantee. Whether if it's a local government or a county, it's the chief elected official, not an appointed official, but the chief elected official of that municipality or county. If it's a not-for-profit or a for-profit entity, it would be the chief elected or the chief executive officer of that organization. And I'll let you define that part. But if it's a government, it must be the chief elected official. That is a federal law for floodplain and wetlands publications. It also is mimicked by state law. So the environmental review specialist can prepare those, arrange for them to be published, but at the end, it's going to be the chief elected official or the chief executive official, depending on your organization, their name at the bottom of each of those 2 publications. We understand that depending on conditions on the ground during the environmental record review or after it, some conditions can change from the time your grant application was submitted, in 2020. So that would require, if you want it fundable with Rebuild Illinois funds, a reevaluation when new activities are added, unexpected conditions arise, or there's changes made, to the location or the extent of a project. You will simultaneously advise, if, say, the environmental record review is already done and you have a grant agreement and you already started work or you're about to start work, you have to simultaneously advise your Rebuild Illinois grant manager and me. And then we will work to update the record review with new project descriptions, funding amounts, locations, and you may have to provide, and I would help guide you, copies to the 4 state environmental agencies for a possible re-clearance. Some items, it just depends. We'd have to work through it together. Sometimes some agencies might not care, others would. Of course, if it's in a field, Department of Ag would have to be notified. If it's in, we'll see. If it's it's an urban area, chances are we don't have to do anything with new species, state endangered species. EcoCat won't care. But again, we would work through that together. In the meantime, when you prepare your environmental record review, send it all to me. Don't send it to your grant manager. Likewise, I don't want your grant-related forms that don't relate to environmental review. So the key thing is, if you're thinking of changing anything, either now while you're doing the environmental review or when you have an executed grant agreement, get a hold of me ASAP and we'll work through it together. Before and during construction, you're going to want to make sure you have a collaborative effort for any mitigations that are identified during the environmental review. All of your construction or building rehab contracts must contain required mitigation language as identified by those 4 state agencies, and if you had to do an 8-step floodplain or wetland review, as you identified in that review. So you'll have to also educate the contractors and their workers on formal mitigations. We've had them before where the copper belly water snake was one of them, where and it's in far southern Illinois, where they had to set up baskets or fences to kind of divert the snakes away from construction, not do construction during specific months of the year. And then you'll track and monitor that implementation and update the environmental review accordingly. If there are formal mitigations, I'll keep a list of those too and kind of spot check to make sure they're being adhered to. Once you have a complete Rebuild Illinois environmental record review, and you're going to get tired of hearing that term during the slideshow, you will send that to me and me only, not to your grant manager. You don't copy them. If they want to know, like say you got all your other special grant conditions done, the grant manager wants to know, hey, is the environmental review done? They'll ask me first, and I have a log sheet I maintain, or a log record that I'll maintain and say, yep, it's in, or I can check through my email and say, nope, they're working on it. I've got one of the 4 state agencies I'm not giving away. They copy me on everything. So I'll know you've started that review when I get that letter emailed to me, either as a CC or if they forget, they'll send it to me a day or 2 later. And that's my early warning picket to know that progress is being made. You or your environmental specialist is moving on it. But these are the instructions for sending them to me. Always, 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 if you're emailing it or mailing it, I need it in color, not black and white. I do not want it double-sided, single-sided only. And you'll scan and email it to me in color or mail it a color copy. Keep your original, because you do not, that is your record to show you complied. If, say there's a building fire here, or whenever the file gets lost on this end, you have it there, you will be fine. Wendy wanted me to emphasize, for environmental emails, you were to send it to that address there, ceo.ero@illinois.gov. Do not use the email address where it's my name linked by a dot at illinois.gov. And then there's the mailing address. During the time of COVID, they have us working remotely different days. So I've got the notice, to you that there's the 2 phone numbers. Right now it seems that my voicemail isn't working on the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So keep trying to call back or email me. If you call in the Wednesday, Friday number and I don't answer, it doesn't have voicemail, but it's a state cell phone. So it does show numbers that have called me, and I call back every person who ever calls me. So I've listened to more return messages for auto warranty repairs over the last year than you'll ever want to know about. But I always return my calls to the state cell phone. Please be patient with your humble environmental record reviewer on this end, because simultaneously at any given time of the year, I'm going to have environmental reviews coming in for our federal funded CDBG grants. Those run anywhere from 45 to 200 pages, and they take time, and they're usually for hard construction that must be started at a given time so that they can get them done, at least start the work during a summer to fall construction cycle. So, we know Rebuild Illinois has a priority to get it out the door. They're much shorter. They'll get work faster. This wasn't a problem during fast track. I doubt it will be with shovel ready sites, but be patient, because we have all kinds of operational needs that, especially me, that don't relate to environmental reviews. So I have to work it all simultaneously, but I will return questions and emails. Sometimes if it just gets to be too much email wise, I just pick up the phone and call. I'd prefer to talk over the phone and get it done. But trust me, if you get your environmental review in, it will be reviewed in a timely manner. Let's go through some of the post-environmental record review actions. For any continuing obligations, as I've said, if you have any mitigations or contingencies identified in your environmental review, you must relay those to the applicable parties and put in, the resulting agreements, put the language into resulting agreements and contracts used to build out your project. Those are the mitigations primarily from the 4 state agencies. And we do verify that through monitoring, periodic spot check, and it can be the verification of pre-construction conference documents. Meaning, if DNR says you've got copper belly water snakes and there's no construction during these months, that needs to be in your pre-construction conference minutes, where you discuss that with the contractor. You've got a copy of the handout that shows what a copper belly water snake looks like, its habitats, and what you have and what the contractors have to do to keep them from being killed while your construction is underway. In conclusion, if you follow all of the environmental review preparation procedures that I outline in the detailed instruction sheets, and follow all of the steps, you will have had a document, body of evidence to show, you're following the state's environmental guidelines and sensibilities and are in compliance with this portion of your grant award. Be sure and just exercise due diligence. Don't rush through it. Those 4 state agencies, they know you've got money to spend that the governor and the General Assembly have committed. They're going to do all they can to help get your reviews done in a timely manner and move you on your way so that you can turn it into me, and hopefully within that 90 days you will be, your no-SAF phase will be concluded and you can move on to the next phase of grant management. Have a nice day, and I'll see you on the next slideshow.